It's nearly time for Springwatch. I suppose I'd better get back on the nest. Got to be seen to be doing the right thing. Here we go. Slowly does it. Whew, that's nice. Hey, look at my crest. How cool is that? Rippling in the wind? Forget those avocets. I'm the star of this show. Hello and welcome to Springwatch 2021. We're in our second week. In fact, we're just about halfway through now our series this year, and we've been basing ourselves here at Wild Ken Hill on the northwest Norfolk coast, and we've been having a fantastic time because there is so much life here on account of the great range of habitats that we've got. Everything from these coastal marshes full of those wading birds like the avocets, the woods here with their buzzard's nest, and out onto that farmland there where we've been watching things like partridges and larks, and of course that gorgeous lapwing that we've just seen. And as I speak, we've got some camera operators out there. We can go to them live to see what they've found for us this evening. Well, there we are. We're starting small tonight, but never underestimate the beauty and fascination of the arachnids. And we've got a small web spinning spider here, busy in the grass. On another camera, we've got this, a kestrel hunting. Maybe, of course, the kestrel that's servicing those chicks in our nest box. Lovely to see the wind hover there. Look at that, hovering in the sky, peering down for voles in those farm fields. Fantastic stuff.
It's great to see the wildlife on our long lens cameras, but of course at the heart of Springwatch are our nest cameras. And I've got to say, Wild Ken Hill has certainly delivered some sensational nests. We've got a fabulous variety there that you can feast your eyes on. And we've already had some departures, we've had some predations, and if you're looking at that little selection, you'll notice we've also had some additions. Going to introduce you to one now that I think, Chris, is a bit of a TV gold. I mean, this
TV gold?
TV. Honestly, it's a spectacular bird. This is it live. See if you agree with me. Well, I know it's hunkered down. It's not looking completely at its best, but this is a sparrowhawk, a bird you normally only see swooping down to swipe a blue tit off your feeders in your garden. But we're now seeing a slightly more tender side to the sparrowhawk. Here's where the nest is. It's in the woods, in the lower part of the canopy, and it's the female that sits on the eggs. She incubates the eggs. She's got 5 eggs underneath her, and you can see them as she steps up. Incubation is about 33 days, so we probably won't see the chicks by the end of the series. The female's the dominant one, 25% bigger than the male. And in fact, she's 15% bigger than she would normally be. Normally, she's about 260 grams, but just before laying those eggs, she puts on an extra 40 or 50 grams. So at the moment, she's a bit of a chunky bird. She's around 300 grams, but just look at those eyes. That's a predator, isn't it? And then you see the male come in. You can see that it's smaller, and the male will spend its time feeding the female, and as soon as those chicks are born, it will then feed the chicks. And if we go back to our smorgasbord of nests, our fantastic variety, you can see that our sparrowhawk's nest is the top right one there.
Well, you're right. Sparrowhawk could be TV gold because the male sparrowhawk is undoubtedly a thigh stroker of enormous magnitude. They are exquisitely beautiful. But let's go back to that board again now, because I think, you know, it's a beautiful bird, but my favourite nest of the night is undoubtedly the lapwing there. Look, lower left with that crest still rippling in the wind. What about you, though? Viewers at home, you've been watching these nests now for more than a week. Do tell us what your favourite is, and do send any of your favourite footage to us. We've already picked out some. What about this? from Venetia Jane in Bedfordshire. She was up early in the morning, about 1 o'clock, peering out of the bedroom window, looked down into the garden to see these fabulous fox cubs throwing themselves, trampolining off of her bush there. Now, you might think they're playing. Let's not get into too big an argument about that. I'd say that they were in training for a life in the wild.
Whether it's training or playing, they're certainly having a good time. And foxes are very popular in people's gardens for obvious reasons. Barry Carter sent us this in from his garden in London. I mean, what's not to love? You've got 4 fox cubs harassing their mum in the garden. What a fabulous place to be right now watching those. Thanks very much for sending all that footage in.
Yeah, fabulous stuff. We'd love to see those fox cubs. We're going to be introducing you to a few new nests as well tonight. But before that, let's head north, far north, to Scotland in the Highlands, where Yolo Williams is based at the Allerdale Wilderness Reserve. How's your evening panning out, Yolo?
Absolutely stunning, Chris. Absolutely stunning. Just look at this, but then what do you expect? This is Scotland. Now let's carry on that fox theme and have a look at this video that was sent in to us by Anne Leach from Beaconsfield. A deer, a roe deer, chasing a fox around her garden. And I hate to use the P word just like you, Chris, but it does appear as if they're playing. The fox is no threat to the deer chases it, the fox hides, then comes back out again. And apparently they were there for several minutes. And hats off to you, Anne, because I know that you filmed that out of your bedroom window. Now, over in Northern Ireland, of course, well, Gillian is over there. What's she doing tonight? Well, she's walking into the middle of a swarm, but fear not. It is a swarm of non-biting midges. So she's gonna be okay, I think. She's gonna be all right. Now, I'm really excited now because we're gonna go back down to Wild Kenhill because I know we've got 2 more stonking new nests to introduce to you. Michaela, over to you.
You're absolutely right, Yolo. We have got more new nests. We're spoiling you tonight. We've already had the sparrowhawk. But if we go back to that selection that we've got, that smorgasbord as I'm calling it, if you look in the top left, then you'll see there's another new nest. Let's go live to it now. Can you see anything in there? Oh yes, there it is. There's our skylark. What a gorgeous shot of the skylark sitting on 4 eggs. Expected to hatch around the 5th of June. That's the female. Really lucky to have them because they've dramatically declined. And so if we look where that nest is, it's actually in the regenerative farming field. And that's why we've got them here, because it's sympathetically farmed for these farmland birds. And there we can see our skylark. It's quite a small bird. It's a little bit bigger than a sparrow, smaller than a starling. There it is. As I say, that's the female, diligently incubating, and the male will feed the chicks once they've hatched. But you know, I think most people are familiar with skylarks when they see the male singing and displaying, and this is what they do. They hover in the sky, and then they parachute down while singing this incredible song. Listen to this. It's one of the most stunning songs in the bird world. 300 syllables, and it's amazing, ascending, beautiful sound. It really is a stunning bird with a spectacular song.
It is spectacular, yeah. That cascade of notes that rains down on you. Sometimes if you can lie right underneath a male that's singing and just focus on that one aspect of your world, it's certainly really uplifting. But I'm going to raise you a lark.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, skylarks have declined quite significantly, but you can still find them over most parts of the UK. This next species is very much more restricted in its range, and there are only 2,300 pairs in the UK, and we're very lucky to have some of them here at Wild Kenhill. Let's go live to another new nest, and this is the nest of a woodlark. Now look at that. It's very well camouflaged, just like the skylark down on the ground. Similar sort of nest, very closely related birds, similar looking you might think. We've been watching these birds closely, and they've been feeding a clutch of 4 chicks. And the nest isn't in an open field. These woodlark nests are always situated closer to some scrub. perhaps a hedgerow or the edge. And there's one of the youngsters there reaching up for food, fed by both parents. And there you can see, and of course it's a diet of insects and their larvae. And when you watch them, they spend a lot of time running, like little brown mice down on the ground. And this one running away from the nest. Now, it won't take off until it's several meters away. It doesn't want to give the whereabouts of that nest away. And there you can see one of the adults settling down to brood. Really, really lovely little bird, the woodlark. But, as I said, quite similar to a skylark. So how do you tell them apart? Well, let's have a look at them in close-up. On the left-hand side of the screen there, you've got the skylark, and on the right, the woodlark. Now, look at the eye stripe, much bolder, bigger, and it runs all the way around the back of the head, isolating the shorter crest than the skylark into a cap. And then its cheek is much plainer, and it's that sort of rusty brown colour. And that is one way you can tell them apart, but of course to do that you need a pretty good view of them, invariably of course on the ground and quite close too. But there is a way of separating them far, far more easily, and that's their song. So let's have another listen briefly to the skylark. Very familiar, dense, lots of notes packed together, a trill. Okay, now listen to the woodlark. Fluty, liquid, pure, but distinct notes, not all packed together. And of course, the woodlark sings in a slightly different way as well. Rather than rise directly up and then parachute down, it doesn't fly quite as high, and sometimes it will fly in a circle whilst singing. They will even sing from perches, and they will even sing at night too. But if you're lucky enough to hear the song of a woodlark, you won't forget it. For me, I think I prefer the song of the woodlark. It's purer,
really?
more simple. Yeah.
Well, I really like both of them, but I do think that the skylark, because it has that amazing range, is more like Whitney Houston, and the woodlark, because it's a little bit more repetitive, is a bit more like a pop songstress, a bit more like Kylie Minogue, I guess. And before you argue, let's go to Scotland, to Iolo, who's going to give us a bit of a seabird fest. Iolo.
Yeah, listen, stop arguing, you two. And Chris, maybe the sparrowhawk is a thigh stroker for you, but for me, it's the woodlark. That would make me stroke my chin, I think. We don't get them up here, and unfortunately, we don't get them in Wales anymore. But it is a beautiful, beautiful bird with a wonderful song. Now, yesterday, we introduced you to Handa Island, a small island about 40 miles northwest of Allerdale, where I am here. It's managed by the Scottish Wildlife Trust, and its position up there, right up in the northwest, means that it's facing the might of the Atlantic Ocean. And the Atlantic storms, the crashing waves, the wind, the incessant rain up there, that has helped to sculpt the island. The little islets there, the rocky coast, the sandy beaches, and of course the tall cliffs, the huge seabird cliffs. Almost 100,000 seabirds nest on Handa Island. It really is a special place. And right up at the north end, you'll find Great Stack. Now this is 115 metres tall. It's a 360-degree cliff face, and it's home to the majority of Handa's seabirds. That's where most of them are. It's a fantastic place. Now come over here with me, because I wanted to rip a cliff off Handa and bring it here, but of course that wasn't feasible. But instead, look at that. This is a prop put together by our researcher Jack, and it represents a cliff on Handa. And I'm going to talk you through not just the cliff itself, but some of the wildlife there as well. And we'll start at the bottom with these boulders. Now these huge boulders will have fallen off the cliff sometimes hundreds of years ago. And they're not places for the birds to nest, they're too low for that. But they are places for a lot of the birds to just rest, to loaf. They'll be resting there, maybe preening their feathers before they go off to feed, or maybe they've just come back and they're about to take over from their partner to incubate the eggs. If we move up the cliff, and this is where the vast majority of the birds are nesting, on these sheer cliff faces here, and the variety and number of seabirds here is absolutely astounding. We are talking about tens of thousands of guillemots, scattered numbers of razorbills, a variety of gulls, and of course there will be fulmars as well, all of them just nesting precariously on these narrow ledges up here. So how were these ledges formed? Well, for that we have to go back hundreds of millions of years, because over that time different strata, different layers of rock have been laid down, one on top of the other like this, and then this has been battered by the waves, by the wind, by the rain, and the soft rock has worn away faster than the hard rock, and that has left behind these narrow ledges here where your guillemots and your razorbills and your fulmar are all nesting. Now if we move up again, we reach the top of the cliff, the very top here, and the habitat here is very different. There's more soil and there's more vegetation here, and this is home to one of our most charismatic seabirds, the puffin. Everybody recognises and loves a puffin. And the puffins, of course, they live in burrows up here, digging into the soil themselves or taking over the old burrows of rabbits. And what's interesting is that the guano of these birds fertilises the soil, so the vegetation grows much faster here. That means that there's food for these rabbits. And so the rabbits are providing homes for the puffin, but inadvertently the puffin is increasing the amount of food up here for those rabbits. It's absolutely fantastic. We'll be going back to Handa several times over the next week and a half or so. Now, Cal Major is an environmentalist and a paddleboarder, and she has been all around the coast of the UK, above and below the water, highlighting the health of our seas. But there's one place Cal has always wanted to explore. It's much nearer to home, and it's a place that gives her hope.
There's no better way to describe myself than an ocean lover. If I could choose anywhere to be, it would be here, just me and the waves. But this is so much more to me than just water. This is as important as the land we live on. The overall health of our planet is equally reliant on the health of our ocean. And I've seen our seas at their very worst. 57, 58. But I also know we're capable of restoring them to their very best. Lundy Island sits 12 miles off the North Devon coast. I can see the island from my bedroom window, and for me, this is an island that offers hope. Back in the 1970s, Lundy's waters were the first in the UK to be granted marine protection. So, to find out what that protection has meant for the island and the surrounding waters, I wanted to explore it from my favourite perspective. Lundy's unique position in the Bristol Channel makes it a wildlife haven. With the oceanic waters of the Atlantic on the west coast, the estuarine waters of the Bristol Channel on the east, and the warm waters brought up by the Gulf Stream from the south, Lundy is their meeting place. The place they all mix. And beneath the surface, the natural results of these colliding and protected worlds are undeniable. kelp forests breathe life into the shallows, while Lundy's reefs extend around a mile offshore, supporting some of our most treasured marine life. Fragile, long-lived species such as pink sea fans and branching sponges are bountiful. As well as these jewel anemones, all 5 species of cup coral are found here, including the scarlet and gold star coral, and my personal favourite, the sunset cup. Since the 1970s, more protection has been offered to Lundy and its surrounding waters, and these efforts appear to be working. Within 5 years of the no-take zone being designated around Lundy, which states no living animal is to be removed from the seas, a massive increase in the size and abundance of its lobsters was observed. Because when the balance is right at the bottom, it works its way up to the top. These protected seas offer important breeding grounds for the island's Atlantic grey seals. And healthy seas also support the island's iconic avian visitors. The word Lundy is Norse for Puffin Island, and the island is renowned for its colony, which nests here from April to July. But the puffins are just one of Lundy's avian jewels, as it's home to a whole range of nesting seabirds, including other auk species such as razorbills, guillemots, and fulmars. Everywhere I look, there is life, an abundance of life.
Lundy is a really special place and a shining example of how our seas and the ecosystems connected to them can thrive if given the proper protection. I feel so grateful to have finally had the opportunity to come and explore Lundy, and I really hope that marine protection like this is rolled out to other places around the UK. Because our seas are so important for all of us, and they really need to be given the chance to regenerate.
Thank you, Carol, and it's great to see some effective marine conservation taking place. Very often we neglect that marine environment. It's easy to concentrate on where we live and not where we so infrequently go. When it comes to good conservation, though, Wild Can Hill is certainly a champion of that. We're looking at the map of it here. Over on this side of the estate, we've got the regenerative agriculture. That's where we've been looking at our skylarks this evening. Down here, we're in the rewilding area, traditional conservation, where Michaela and I are at the moment here on the marshes. But we thought that we'd stick our noses over the fence, see what the neighbours are up to. And the fence is about 500 metres over there, and you get a view to the beach. And this is the beach that runs down to Snettisham. A mixture of sand and shingle, and home to a different group of birds, including the little ringed plover, a lovely little bird.
It really is an adorable little bird, but when it is on those pebbles, it's incredibly well camouflaged, especially when it's on the nest. So I want you to watch this. Shout at the telly when you can spot the bird. We'll zoom in. If you're looking to the right, you're looking in the wrong place. Take your eyes to the left. Should be able to focus in on it now. I'm sure most of you have shouted at the telly. There it is, the ringed plover. And you can see just how well it's camouflaged by all those surrounding pebbles. And believe it or not, it's sitting in its nest. I mean, it's a very unassuming nest, and Chris is going to show how you make the nest with our little pile of sand here. Go on, Chris.
All right, so what they do is they shift a few stones, probably not as big as that one, but that would be quite heavy for them. So they push those out of the way. And then what they do is they tip up on their back legs. Well, that's the only legs they've got, isn't it? The back legs of a bird. They tip up on their legs and they press their breast down into the sand and they turn around like that to make a shallow cup. And on occasion, it's said that they might adorn it with a seashell. I rather imagine that the seashells might have already been there in the first place. And it's into this that the female will lay her eggs. Now, I've got some beautifully hand-painted cardboard eggs here. Unfortunately, they only come in 2 dimensions. The BBC budget at the moment won't stretch to 3 dimensions. It certainly won't stretch in 3 dimensions. So here we've got those eggs, and they lay them in that particular pattern with the pointed end pointing into the middle of the nest so that the female can incubate them. Let's take a look at some real eggs and see if you can spot them, because just like the adult, they are remarkably well camouflaged amongst the sand and the pebbles. Let's zoom in. There you are. And if we put the circle around them, it's an incomplete clutch here. It's just 2 of the eggs in the centre of your screen.
Absolutely amazing. As I say, it's so unassuming, isn't it, that nest? So we've seen the adult, we've seen the nest, we've seen the eggs. What about the chicks? Well, as you can imagine, not only is the adult adorable, so are the chicks. So there's the adult sitting on that nest, having a nice little... Oh, look. Just look. Isn't that the most gorgeous shot of one of the chicks? They're precocial, so they're pretty developed when they hatch. And as soon as they hatch, they're off on the beach exploring. I actually reckon those are a day or so old because they look very steady on their feet. But at this age, I mean, despite them being so well camouflaged, they are still very vulnerable to gulls, foxes, and crows. And because they're well camouflaged, they're also very vulnerable to human disturbance because obviously they're extremely difficult for people to see.
And there are plenty of people there. Judging by the traffic on the main road outside of Wild Ken here, there were plenty visiting the beach this year. In fact, recent statistics tell us that tourism in Norfolk has increased by 236.36% this year. So a lot more people coming to this part of the world, and they're not coming on their own. They're bringing their companions with them in the form of dogs. And the Pet Food Manufacturers Association tell us now that 33% of UK households have dogs. That's 12.5 million dogs. So undoubtedly there will be dogs out on the beach. So whilst the people might behave themselves, as we saw last week with the dog that was rampaging on the marsh here, those animals have the potential to cause real disturbance. And that's why the RSPB down at Snettisham have set up a scheme called Plovers in Peril, and it's being staffed by volunteers. And we've got to admit that a lot of UK conservation comes down to that volunteer effort. Without them, we simply couldn't make the progress that we wish to make. So, how does it work? Well, the RSPB have fenced off the area where the plovers are nesting. You can see a sign there, and just to the right of it, a nesting plover. Now, humans, of course, can read the signs, and they're asked to actually walk right down by the tide line to avoid the area completely. But of course, if your dog is off the lead or your dog is out of control, it can easily skip underneath the rope and disturb the birds. It may not trample the eggs, it may not eat the young, but it will drive them off of the nest, making those young and eggs vulnerable to other predators, and also exhausting the adults, particularly on a very busy beach. So if you are one of the 236.36% of people who have decided to come to Norfolk on your holidays this year, will you please think about those birds out there on the beach? They only get one chance to breed every year, and if you do bring your dog, keep it on a lead near all of those areas. Thank you.
And it's only for a few months of the year, isn't it, that they have to be super careful. Right, this time last week, well, it was Friday actually, do you remember we had those amazing swirls of midges that were right here actually?
The midgenados. You're talking about the midgenados.
The midgenados, yeah, they were absolutely superb, weren't they? Well, Gillian also experienced them over in Northern Ireland, and she was so fascinated by them that she wanted to get into the detail of their life cycle.
During my time here in Northern Ireland, I've wanted to discover all this amazing place has to offer. And I've come here to Lough Neagh to see some small creatures that put on a big show. And they are literally all around me. The Loch Ness flies. Loch Ness is a huge freshwater lake. It supplies 40% of Northern Ireland's drinking water. It's also home to some of my favourite species, things like swallows and house martins and grebes. But in the depths of the lake is an abundance of insect life, and in spring, they take flight.
The midges form huge clouds like biological tornadoes.
But they are much less destructive because luckily for us, these flies don't bite.
We notice the adults when they're on the wing, but they're only on the wing for a few days, and when they are, they're here to do one thing and one thing only: breed. They don't even feed. As well as each other, they're also attracted to the walls of the visitor centre. The Loch Ness flies are in fact made up of a few different species, and if you look closely, you'll see male midges sporting spectacular headdresses.
Once they've mated, the females will rest down onto the surface of the water and they will lay their eggs, and their eggs will then sink down to the lake bed below. On average, it's about 8 meters deep here in this lake, so not very deep at all. So let's take a look at what happens next. Well, the eggs settle down and they will hatch out, and that's where the larvae will start to feed on microscopic organisms, things like blue-green algae, diatoms, and they'll go through several molts until they're ready to pupate. Now, they have to hit a magic number, which is 1 milligram, because that's when they can rise to the surface and emerge as adults. Now, if there isn't enough food or if it's too cold, they'll wait for a year until the conditions are right for them to emerge. So occasionally, 2 generations will emerge at the same time, and when they do, they form these enormous swarms. This is some footage captured by James O'Neill right here, and these swarms can be absolutely massive. It's estimated that in a square metre there can be as many as 5,000 flies in the air. Now, the adults get a lot of the attention for obvious reasons, but I think it's worth looking at the larvae as well, because I think they're pretty cool. Now, if you keep fish, you will be familiar with these. They are fed to fish, they're live food called bloodworms, and they're called that because they are bright red. Now, that red colour is because they are full of hemoglobin. Now, this is the same stuff that makes our blood red. It helps us to get oxygen into our blood. Now, this helps them to thrive at the bottom of the lake, where it's pretty poor in oxygen levels.
For more than 9 months, bloodworms will be in this form, constantly collecting and eating the algae and detritus.
But they themselves are food as well for all sorts of things like eels, for dragonfly larvae, and there's lots of them too. There's up to 4,000 for every square metre on the bottom of the lake. So they are a really important part of the food chain, not just as when they're aquatic larvae, but also when they're adults. Now, later in the programme, I'm going to be looking at some birds that fly miles and miles just to feed on these things. I'm talking about swifts.
Now, I've got to say, I have a soft spot for flies. I really like flies. There are many very interesting flies, but I think most people are going to prefer damsel flies, and we saw these earlier this afternoon. These are azure damsel flies, and the male is holding the female there in what we call in tandem. He's effectively mate guarding. He's got hold of the female so that no other male can come in and start mating with her. She is landing on the water surface and dropping her abdomen down to lay the eggs on the water weed beneath, and some of them even have a sharp blade on the bottom of their body which cuts a slit into the water plant so that they can lay their eggs inside it so it's better protected. What about that? A beautiful sight, azure damselfly.
It's actually very beautiful to watch, isn't it, that?
Stunning. Oh, I've just heard we've got some live deer. One of our camera operators is out there with a couple of, what are they? Looks like roe deer, just peeping. Oh no, that's hare.
Is it hare?
Hold on. It's been sold a duff. I was told deer.
The hares are the ones with the long ears, Chris.
Go on. Come on, stand up. There we are. There's a roe deer. There's a roe deer. Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. Beautiful.
Well, let's have a look again at our Nest cameras, the little selection, because I'm going to take you up to the top middle to the buzzards, because we haven't actually checked in with them for a couple of days. But before we do, maybe we should look at the birds and things that we've seen on the marsh.
Yeah, we've had our camera operators down here on the marsh and they've picked up a lot of really beautiful pictures and we haven't been able to squeeze them in, so we thought that you might enjoy them. So just for a minute, immerse yourself in the marsh without getting wet, but enjoying the beauty of the birds that live here. Beautiful.
What a glorious sunset. Do you think we're going to get one like that tonight?
Oh, there's every chance,
There
isn't
might be
there?
too many clouds, mightn't there? Well, that gave us a wader fest. We've had a seabird fest. I'm going to continue with a raptor fest. And we saw with that selection of cameras that I showed you just a minute ago, in the middle on the top was our buzzards. And as I said, we haven't really checked in with them for a few days. So here it is, like, oh, that is a glorious shot of the buzzard. Just look at that. Now we know that the buzzard has 2 chicks and there they are. And you may not even recognise these chicks because they have dramatically changed since we've been watching them. This was them on the 23rd of May, just before we started the series, like little white bundles of feathers. And here they are, a few days on from that. And look, there's loads of movement in that nest now. Flapping their wings, they're branching basically, so they're standing on the side of the nest, exercising their wings, and you can see how those feathers have grown. And look at those, I love the chaps on their legs. They look like 2 little cowboys. And they've grown so much because they're being fed so well. Both of the parents are feeding. That's the male, the smaller bird that you can see in the foreground there. Now, they won't fledge until they're about 7 weeks old, between 44 and 52 days. So we're not going to see them fledge, but we're certainly going to continue to watch them grow. And as I say, they look like almost different chicks, don't they? And that's just in the last 2 weeks.
It's remarkable how quickly they change, isn't it? Beautiful bird, the buzzard, but now swiftly on to another, the chough, our most attractive corvid, perhaps, or you might argue it might be Jay. Yesterday, we were looking inside the breeding behaviour of these with the help of conservationist Tony Cross, who'd set up some nest boxes last spring on the Welsh coast with cameras inside so we could witness what was going on with their family life. Here is part 2.
Early May on the Welsh coast,
The cliffs are blooming and the locals are enjoying the sun. But inside the nest box, our chuffs are preoccupied with some demanding new arrivals. Sadly, not all 5 of the eggs hatched successfully. But in previous years, our couple raised just 3 chicks, so they still hope to top that, if they can just keep these hungry mouths fed. After feeding, the chicks produce fecal sacs, bundles of waste that the house-proud parents dutifully tidy up. But they're full of nutrients that the young chicks can't digest yet, so they can be a quick snack. Dad discards his on the rocks nearby. Meanwhile, Mum is left dealing with the perennial problem of all new parents, a troubling stain on a shoulder. As spring progresses, the parents must head out for supplies frequently and often together. Pairs forage side by side and work the fields quickly. The tireless parents deliver to the brood every 20 minutes. Their chicks grow fast in the first week, gaining around 1/4 of their body weight every day. Two weeks later, the pair's hard work is clearly paying off. The nest is becoming a squeeze as the growing siblings squabble and squirm. Despite the cramped conditions, the restless youngsters are making room to stretch their wings. But the outside world is far from inviting. A shadowy form prowls the cliffs. Ravens are nest raiders and cunning opportunists. The unattended chicks could make an easy meal. Higher on the cliff, a kestrel spots the skulking menace. These neighbours have an uneasy relationship with chuffs. They often compete for nest sites, and our female has lost out to one in the past. But a raven is a threat to both. Dwarfed but fearless, the raptor stoops at the raven. Terrorising a bird 5 times its weight and driving away the danger. Today, the natural rival has saved our chicks. Finally, the parents return, and commotion of feeding resumes. Mum settles everyone down and straightens the scruffiest plumage. Very soon, they'll need to put these feathers to the test. Nice to catch up with the chuffs there, and of course we wanted to bring you the full picture. What happened afterwards? Well, it was filmed last year. COVID came along. We went into lockdown. Nobody could go out and about, not even Tony, to check up on his birds. But we have been in touch with Tony, and he has given us an update. We now know that that very same pair is back in that very same nest on the West Wales coast again this year. We know this because they've got colour rings and we can identify them as individuals. And we also know that 3 chicks fledged successfully. The 4th, well, we're not quite sure, but to be honest with you, 3 chicks out of a Welsh chough nest, well, that's not bad going at all. Now, nests. I've always been fascinated by nests, and of course here on Springwatch, well, we have live cameras on nests, so Springwatch wouldn't be Springwatch without nests. But what's the purpose of a nest? Well, it's protection, really, protecting the eggs and the growing chicks from predators, which we've seen, it doesn't always work, but also from the elements, from wind, rain, sleet and snow. And of course, usually they're built from plant material, and they're very different. Our sparrowhawk nest, the new nest we introduced you to earlier, big pile of twigs, high up in a tree, 5 eggs in there in the cup, and you think the bird will be safe. Sedge warbler lower down in some tall vegetation, the reeds woven into some moss, nice and secure. And near the floor, of course, our chiff-chaff nest. Didn't prove to be that secure, but it's a lovely nest, nice and warm in there. Now this is a blackbird nest. It was taken from a garden in Somerset last autumn after the young had fledged, of course, and it looks like any other blackbird nest. Until I turn it around. Look at that. See all this plastic, cling film in this case, woven into the nest there, and this is a real danger to the adults. They could get tangled up in that. The chicks could start chewing at it. It could choke them. And it's not just us. You are also seeing plastic in more and more nests too. This is a picture of a song thrush nest that was sent in to us by Gillian Merritt, and you can see in there the dangerous amounts of plastic string. There's all kinds of stuff in there. It's just, it's not on. It really is so dangerous. Now, unfortunately, not much research has been done on plastic in nests like that. But up here in Scotland, the Environmental Research Institute, they are starting to look into it. And if you've got a nest with plastic in it, they would like to hear from you. And if you want to get in touch, visit our website and all the information is there. Luckily, however, there's more research done on seabird nests and plastic. And recently a team led by seabird ecologist Danny Thompson visited Lady Isle in southwest Scotland, an uninhabited island, to look at the amount of plastic in the nests of 5 different seabirds. Now come over with me here. I have a bar chart here that Chris Packham would be proud of. The 5 species. I'll go from left to right, and remember, it's the percentage of nests containing plastic. Herring gull, 35%, lesser blackback gull, 25%, great blackback gull, 53%. I'll miss this one out and go to cormorant here, 25%. Then I'll come back here to the shag. A whopping 80% of shag nests contained plastic. Why so many? Well, one of the reasons they believe is that shags, they don't build a new nest every year, they rebuild last year's nest and piling on more and more material and more plastic on there. But it's a damning indictment of the human race and our wasteful use of plastic. So what can we all do? Well, this week is Volunteers Week, so why don't we all volunteer to take part in a beach clean? Better still, when we go to the beach this summer, take some of that plastic home, because if all of us do it, it will make an enormous difference. Now, for the past week up here, it's been lovely and sunny, and that has brought in the swifts. Initially 5 pairs, then 6, now 7, maybe even 8 pairs, and it's a joy to watch them and listen to them flying around every evening. And over in Northern Ireland, Gillian has been catching up with the swifts of Loch Ness.
I'm here on the shores of Loch Ness, right outside the Discovery Centre. Now, earlier in the programme, we were looking at the swarms of insects that are food for all kinds of creatures, like the ones just above me. Now, those are house martins. They are nesting in the eaves of the centre itself. These birds have clearly been very busy. They have established their nests, and we've been watching them heading out, catching insects on the wing over the lake and even above my head. But of course, these insects aren't just food for house martins. The flies here are also food for birds like common swifts. This is the only species of swift found here in Northern Ireland, and just like the house martins, they arrive here in the spring all the way from southern Africa.
Common swifts famously spend most of their lives in flight. They eat, drink, mate, and even sleep on the wing. Studies have shown that they can stay in the air for an incredible 10 months without stopping.
In 2016, the RSPB and the BTO joined forces with the Northern Ireland Swift Group. They wanted to understand the movement of the birds that arrive here in the spring. So they attached GPS trackers weighing just under a gram to monitor and follow their movements. And this is what they found. Well, unsurprisingly, the birds that nest here on the lake shore spend most of their time foraging on the shores of Lough Neagh. We know that Lough Neagh has this amazing source of food. But the real surprise came when they tracked birds that nest in Belfast. Now, that's all the way across here. Now, occasionally, the birds will head down to Strangford Lough, but most of the data points are this corridor heading straight out to Lough Neagh. That is a round trip of 40 miles. And it just goes to show what a draw the insects are here for the birds, even from as far away as Belfast. And in fact, analysis of the Belfast birds' droppings finds that 16.8% is made up of these non-biting midges found over here at Lough Neagh in their diet. So that is an absolutely extraordinary food source. Now, we know that insect populations are in sharp decline overall, so it is possible that the aquatic insects over here at Lough Neagh are starting to fill a gap, particularly for the birds that nest further afield, those Belfast swifts. And at this time of year, that's especially important for, of course, raising their chicks and making sure they have a really good supply of insect prey. Unfortunately, swift numbers have also been dropping. In the last 20 years, almost 50% have disappeared. And over here, they've recently been moved onto the red list. It's not just falling insect numbers that are affecting swift populations, it's also habitat loss. Swifts are incredibly site loyal. They like to return to the same nesting site year on year. And particularly for urban birds, this will be nesting cavities in buildings. Now, as these buildings are renovated or even demolished, it means the swifts are losing their nesting sites as well. So falling insect numbers and habitat loss, and combine that with a changing climate, and that is an enormous amount of pressure on these birds.
It's a critical time for these enigmatic avians. It's vital that we learn more about them to help preserve their habitat. And there's now a way that we can all get involved.
The RSPB have launched their Swift Mapper app. Now, this is a way for you to be able to record when swifts arrive, when they leave, where they're nesting, even where they forage. All of that data will be combined to help inform organizations and even housing developments to better preserve the nesting sites for these amazing birds. So head to our website if you want to take part. All the information will be there.
Lots of you have commented on social media that you've noticed that swifts and swallows have arrived late this year. And what would be great is to get all that information into proper data that can be analysed. So please do make an effort to download that app. Now, I know we've been filming here on the farm, but as Chris said, we've also been filming our neighbours on the other side of the fence at Snettisham Beach. And this is what we've seen, something you certainly won't see on the farm. It's a grey seal. It's hauled itself out to chill out and digest. This is probably a juvenile, and I presume that's probably one that was born in the winter, end of autumn, beginning of winter at Blakeney Point, which is just along the coast. Absolutely gorgeous seal. It's surrounded by sanderlings, and they tend to hang around the edges of the breaking waves, going into the pebbles and the sand, trying to find something to eat. And as the tide comes in, it pushes them up the beach. So high tide is a good time, isn't it, Chris, to go and do a bit of bird spotting?
It is, and those birds are probably all failed breeders that have come from the far north, or they didn't try and breed in the first place. So most of them should be in the north at the moment breeding, but it's great to have a few on the beach here for us to look at.
Time for a mindful moment, and I don't know about you, but I find that a walk in the wood really helps me to declutter my thoughts. So sit back, relax and enjoy the beauty and wildlife of Whiteham Woods in Oxford, courtesy of Jack Richardson.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. The sun sparkling. And from sparkling sun to one of our sparkling birds, let's go live to our swallows that are nesting in the barn here at Wild Ken Hill. So there's a view looking down onto the top of the nest, 3 youngsters in there. We were initially worried that the clutch was small and they may not survive because it was so bad here, the weather, the adults weren't catching much food, but I have to say that since the sun's come out, look at this, you can see they're arriving back regularly and the young are already developing those feathers on their head. You know a remarkable thing? At this stage, the adult swallows can determine the sex of the young in the nest, and they will preferentially feed the males because the males have a lower survival rate after fledging. What about that? They can actually tell which one of these fluffy little balls of feathers is a male bird at this stage. Absolutely incredible. Sadly, that's all we've got time for today. We will be back tomorrow when we'll be sticking our nose, well, not into, but close to dung, which is full of life.
And I'm going to be looking at some of the mountain wildlife here at Allerdale.
And Gillian will be with us live from Northern Ireland, and this is what she's up to. She's getting a glimpse of some caterpillar catching cuckoos. Of course, Chris and I will still be here at Norfolk, and what do you reckon? Is it going to be a beautiful sunset now?
I think it's going to be a stunning
sunset. I think it's going to be a stunner, isn't it?
And if you want to stay up together with our live nest, you can. They're on between 10 and 10 at night. And of course, you can contact us with anything interesting on Twitter, Facebook or Instagram. And an Instagram live tomorrow. Who's on tomorrow?
Not sure, actually.
Could be Gillian answering your questions. Send them in. Good night.
Good night.